This is your Unit 20 video lesson part 3, in which we're going to discuss various different ecological relationships. Another term for this would be symbiosis. So this is going to discuss how different organisms have evolved over time to work together and make the most of their habitats and environments around them. You should be completing the symbiosis interactive notebooking activity as you watch the video. That's going to be considered your notes for this part of Unit 20. So make sure you're completing that as I fill it in on the screen. Make sure that gets included in your journal and checked off as well for a grade. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, symbiosis is a concept that we use to talk about organisms that have adapted to their environments together may evolve together and make the best of their habitat by building a partnership or relationship called symbiosis. Okay, so symbiosis actually translates into meaning living together. So when we're talking about symbiotic relationships, we're talking about organisms that live together, and in order for it to be a symbiotic relationship, it has to be a relationship in which where it's going to between two different species. So we're not talking about relationships between the same species, but a relationship between two completely different species, and in order for it to be symbiotic, at least one of them has to benefit from the relationship. Okay, so there's going to be 4 different types that we're going to talk about during this video lesson, and you need to know and be able to recognize the differences between all 4. Alright, the first type we're going to talk about is commensalism. And so this one's kind of tricky. It can be one of the trickier ones to identify. So in commensalism, you are looking for a relationship in which one is benefiting and one is neutral or unaffected. So I often think of one is happy and then one is just like, I don't care, I'm not benefiting, I'm not hurt, harmed, or hurt from this. So this relationship doesn't really bother me either way. I'm just kind of here, and whatever happens, happens. Okay, so we have one that's happy, one that's benefiting, and one that is unaffected. So our first blank will be unaffected. And in nature, we actually see lots of different examples of commensalism. So I want you to think to yourself right now, think about an example that you've seen in nature or that you've learned about before in which one organism is benefiting and the other organism is not affected by the relationship. Alright, so commensalism can kind of be a tricky one to think of examples for. Some examples include barnacles on a whale. So the barnacles are going to be the ones that are benefiting, so they're happy, or we can represent that with a plus sign. And the whale is unaffected, neutral, or we can represent that with a 0. So the barnacle is actually attached to the whale as the whale is swimming through the water. Okay, the barnacles are able to trap food and get food that way because they're filter feeders. So as the whales swim through the water, the food passes by and into the barnacles are able to get their food that way. The whale is unaffected. Okay, the whale is not hurt, it's not harmed, it is not benefiting from the barnacles being there. It really just doesn't care that they're there. So the barnacles are benefiting, the whale is neutral. Another example that you might not be aware of is a sloth and algae. So sloths actually have algae that grow on their fur, and the algae is there because sloths live at the top of trees. So the algae use the sloths as a way to get higher up out of the rainforest so that they can get sun to do photosynthesis. So the sloths then, in this example, are the ones that are unaffected. Okay, so they're neutral. And the algae that's growing in the fur of the sloth, it's actually benefiting or happy because this relationship allows them to get a better amount of sunlight to do photosynthesis. Alright, the next type of symbiotic relationship is called mutualism. And this is a pretty easy one because we have lots of different relationships in nature where organisms have evolved together so that both of them are actually benefiting from each other. So mutualism is a relationship in which two organisms benefit from the actions of the other. So this is a plus plus, meaning that both organisms are happy. So both are benefiting from this. So we have lots of different examples. I want you to take a moment and think about some examples that you know or that you've learned about before in which mutualism could be the reason behind that relationship. All right, so some examples would include, we have the bees and flowers. Okay, so this is a pretty common one. These have co-evolved together. Bees are benefiting from the flowers because they're getting nectar from the flowers. The flowers are benefiting because the bees are pollinating the flowers, which is crucial for the plant to be able to reproduce. So both are benefiting in that example. Another example would be like the crocodile and the teeth cleaning birds. So if you've ever seen those crocodiles that have the birds that come in and pick the meat out of their teeth, those crocodiles are benefiting because the birds are cleaning their teeth, and the birds are benefiting because they're getting a free meal out of the relationship. So the crocodiles get their teeth cleaned and the birds get free food. Another example, this one's kind of controversial. Some people say this is mutualism, some people say it's commensalism. We will write it down on mutualism, but it's important that you read the context of the question whenever you are asked about this one. So a pretty common one, especially after Finding Nemo, was sea anemones and clownfish. Okay, so this, if we're talking about how the clownfish is cleaning the sea anemone and the sea anemone in turn is protecting the clownfish, then that would be mutualism, right? So there are a lot of different types of mutualistic relationships in nature because that's one that wants to happen because then everyone wins, everyone's happy, right? So let's move on to our next type of relationship. So our third type of relationship is actually parasitism. Parasites are not good, and this is because in a parasitic relationship, one organism benefits, all right? This is going to be the parasite. And the other one is harmed, and this is going to be the host. So in a parasitic relationship, the parasite's benefiting, the host is harmed. So I often say one is happy and one is sad. Okay, the host is sad because they're being hurt in this relationship. So an example would be like a dog, which would be the host, so it's sad, and a flea or a tick, which would be happy because it's getting the blood from the dog. That's one common example. Another example would be like a tree, which would be sad, and mistletoe. So mistletoe is actually a plant parasite that grows on the tree and takes nutrients from the tree. So the mistletoe is happy, but the tree is actually sad because it's being hurt. Other examples might be like tapeworms and things like that. So these examples are pretty easy to identify. Just remember that in parasites, one is happy, one is harmed. All right, the last type of relationship that I want to talk about is predator-prey. I'm aware that this one is not in your little foldable, but I expect for you to write this down in your journal. It's literally 2 sentences. I think you can handle it. So in a predator-prey relationship, this is when one organism consumes another. So one organism is benefiting, okay, and the other is dead. So in this one, I think one is happy and one is dead. Okay, so in predator-prey, this is going to be one of the ecological relationships in which, you know, we have, for instance, a bobcat chasing a rabbit. This is a pretty easy one to identify. So hopefully that one will be not too difficult for you to understand. All right, so this is it for ecological relationships. You will be expected to be able to identify each of these different types of symbiotic relationships if I give you examples, and identify what type it is and who's benefiting or who is being harmed in each situation. All right, make sure you have everything copied down in your blanks as well as anything extra that I've added onto the screen. Make sure you have your interactive notebooking glued down into your journal, and when you are finished, get ready to get checked off and move on to the next activity.